Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Adventures of a Real Estate Investor. I'm Susie.
And I'm Michael, and we're excited you joined us for this adventure.
So today we have a very special guest, and I'm super excited because we get to bring him on the podcast. I've spent a lot of time with this very wonderful individual in person, and I'm excited to bring him to all of you. So thank you so much, Mike Marara, for joining us today.
Oh, thanks. I hope I can live up to the hype.
You can. So to give just like our wonderful adventurous family some background, Mike Marara is a broker in Oklahoma, specifically for us right now, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, surrounding wonderful areas. But he was the broker on our second deal ever in Pryor, Oklahoma for the park. And so just since then, our relationship has launched and it's just been really
Mhm.
awesome to be able to like grow together. It's been fun. So thank you.
Absolutely. So, Mike, this is actually the first time that we've had a broker on the show. So, congratulations. You're the first broker that,
You're
and
the lucky
you're the
winner.
lucky winner.
Wait, you mean there's other brokers?
Never.
So, but obviously, we know a lot about you. Would you mind sharing with our adventurous family, a little bit more about your background and how you started getting into real estate?
Sure, I'm happy to. It's kind of an interesting story and an interesting pathway. I think, like a lot of people, real estate wasn't my first career. This is a second career for me. So I'm going to kind of take a step back. When I was in college, I was 18, so I knew everything. Rather rather than take the full ride scholarship to Tulane in New Orleans, I decided I think I want to work full time and go to school part time. So, in my all my wisdom there, I ended up getting a job in land surveying, which I thought, this is a good job to have. My company was generous enough to pay my way to get a degree, and I liked it, well enough to that I thought, hey, this is a good job to have while going through college. Well, working full time and getting a part time degree, it took a while. So after 10 years, I did finally get a 4-year degree. But by that time, I had moved up in the surveying profession to the point where I could just take my business degree and necessarily go change professions. Well, I could, but I was like, wait a minute, I think makes more sense to apply it to what I'm doing. And I had been anyway. So by that point, I kind of moved up to where I was project management, business development. So it was really kind of a cool job within that profession. So I've been in real estate in so much as that I've dealt with the survey and the planning, civil engineering side of the business. But basically in 2008 and 9, like a lot of industries, that industry was, I worked for a great guy, good company, but it was kind of the push I needed at that point. I mean, I was still employed, but it was kind of the push I needed to try something different. And at the time, a lot of my clients were commercial brokers. And there were a handful of them that they really seemed to enjoy what they did, loved what they did day in and day out. They were enthusiastic about their job. You could tell it. I was at the point in my career to where I was like, if I really wanted to grow any more in my profession, I probably would have needed to own my own surveying business. And that's something I really didn't want to do. It's a lot of investment in equipment, pickup trucks, employees, and I was kind of ready to have less of that or not more of it. So I made the jump into commercial real estate. I joined a firm that was a small boutique firm that did multifamily real estate. It's guys that I knew, and it was a fantastic place to learn and get immersed in the business. So yeah, this is my 13th year is in the real estate business from the broker's position. So
Oh, that's cool. How did you get involved? Like, how did you get to Oklahoma? And you said you were down in Tulane area surveying stuff.
well, actually, I I ultimately decided not to go to Tulane, which was still a sticky subject decades later around the house. I as it honestly as an 18-year-old, I just don't think I was quite ready to leave home to go that far to school. So no, I've lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I actually graduated from Broken Arrow. My dad was relocated or transferred here. He was in broadcasting, and I was in, I think, eighth grade at the time. So I've basically, am I an Oklahoma native? No, but for the most part, I've grown up here and spent most of my life here in the Tulsa area. So
Cool. This is great. I mean, there's so much power in, commercial real estate and especially multifamily as we'll get into later. But like, you said you moved into commercial real estate. Like, So what do you do? What do you focus on now? Is it mostly multifamily, land sales, things like that, or you do some commercials, some other, retail and office space?
I'm going to say it's entirely multifamily. Well, let me qualify that. We do take on land listings, but only if they have a multifamily component. I'm not the guy that's going to list pad sites in front of a Sam's warehouse or anything like that. I wouldn't know the slightest thing about selling that type of land. So basically, everything we do day in and day out in our business is multifamily or multifamily related. So I've always been a specialist. And I will tell you, the first year or two in the business, that was kind of painful because I worked for a company that did just multifamily, and I would have my network or friends were like, "Hey, I'm thinking about selling a warehouse. Can you help me out?" I'm like, "No, I
It's
really
not.
can't." And it was hard because it felt like I was giving away, potential income. But the reality is, it wasn't. In the long run, it's just very much a long run, long end game run. But it is to be very, very knowledgeable about your specific product segment. And in this case, multifamily. Know multifamily inside and out. Know the market and know the properties, know the procedures, and that's all I've really ever done. So,
Yeah.
to the point, I've owned some other real estate. We had a family business and we owned some industrial real estate. When it came time to sell, I called up the expert in industrial. I did not try to do the job myself.
Gotcha, gotcha, yeah. I mean, so being in Tulsa for 13 years in the multifamily real estate bridge business, like, I'm sure you've seen, I'm sure, number one, every single property in the Tulsa MSA and quite a few in Oklahoma City as well, I'm sure, and in the surrounding areas. But I'm sure you've seen them change hands multiple times too, right? Every, you know,
Indeed.
3 to 7 years or whatever. I'm sure you've seen, what, at least 3 cycles of every single property almost. So yeah, I mean, and then that being said as well, like I'm sure you saw some unprecedented sales and volume that was kind of being moved through in the past couple of years, right?
Oh, exactly. Last year, honestly, was a record year for Tulsa in terms of multifamily sales. We topped over $1 billion in sales last year. In fact, that actually exceeded Oklahoma City's sales volume, which,
Wow.
to my knowledge, may not have ever happened before. Last year, 2022 was a very unique year in our market. Obviously, it came out of the gate hot. Interest rates started going up, and they did indeed have the intended effect on the market, a very chilling effect on the market. So overall, though, Tulsa had a fantastic year. We did see some record sales. Part of what made Tulsa's sales volume so big last year in terms of dollar volume was we had 10 A-class properties trade hands and 10 B-class properties. That is very unusual. A typical year, we might see maybe 3 or 4, Class A sales, and this year we saw 10 of each. That drove that total dollar volume up in our market. Our market's still based upon the typical C-class property trading, and there were 26 of those that traded hands last year. So, but yeah, we did see, per unit prices increase. Have some notes, but we saw record per unit prices paid for both Class A, Class B, and Class C properties. So definitely exciting times in our market, and definitely some certain amount of uncertainty. That sounded odd. There's
No,
certain uncertainty.
but it's true.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in that 2022 sales volume, most of that took place in the first half of the year, right? Because I think towards the end of 2022, most of that kind of dwindled as things came off the market.
Generally speaking, yes. Tulsa was a little bit unique in that, in so much as at the end of the year, there was a portfolio that consisted of two large Class A deals that traded, so that kind of skewed up the end of the year numbers. But yeah, you're right. More of the volume is in the first and second quarter than the third and fourth. Now, Oklahoma City saw that more pronounced. The fourth quarter in Oklahoma City was, I think, the 17th slowest fourth quarter we had on record. So I think it affected that market a little more than ours. But again, I think it was merely more of if you take the Class A sales out of I think it looked like a more typical year, and we certainly saw less Class C transactions at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess just to kind of piggyback on this conversation right now is like, so, we had quite a few sales beginning of 2022, then interest rates spiked, things started, I would say cooling, but like people weren't really selling, they want to take their property market towards the end of the year. As you
Mhm.
said, Q4 was kind of slow time. And now we're in April 2023 having this discussion. What have you seen in the first quarter of this year? And what do you see moving forward now that we're in Q2?
Yeah, I think you're right. You hit the nail on the head. At the end of the year, you didn't see a lot of people, a lot of sellers. I think everybody was just kind of in retreat mode, so to speak. Let's see what's going on around us. There's uncertainty. Everybody knows the one thing the real estate market doesn't like is uncertainty. We know how to deal with the known. It's the it's the unknown, the uncertainty that causes pauses in our activity. And kind of saw that really the first quarter of this year as well. Just not a lot of sellers, kind of a wait and see attitude, not certain what interest rates to write to, what's going to go, where they're going to go, et cetera. We start seeing that start to break loose maybe, so let's say March 1st. Started getting a lot more inquiries about, hey, what's happening in the market? We've got some interest in selling. Let's have some discussions. And honestly, we probably have more BOVs in process right now than maybe we've had ever. So I'm actually anticipating some increased market activity in fourth quarters for sure, and probably starting to see some of that already starting to manifest.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, what do you think some of the biggest reasons that you're hearing of why people want to put their property on the market now? Is it because bridge loans or cap rates are expiring? Or sorry, I say cap rates, but I mean rate caps. I just can't get it out of my
Same words, just different order.
head.
That is definitely driving some of the things that we're seeing right. Last year, a lot of things came to market because it's a great time to put things on the market.
Yeah.
Prices low, cap rates, lots of market activity. Now, I think people are more of a mindset. There's a reason behind why they have to sell other than trying to get the best price that they're ever going to see. The bridge financing coming due is a big component. A lot of the conversations we're having, or the rate caps expiring, stuff like that is certainly among the conversations right now that are going to prompt people to take things to market. I will say another thing we're seeing is people have executed their business plans, so they still want to go ahead and sell. They can. Some of the properties I've seen, they can refinance and they'll be fine, but they may not. They're not going to refinance at the rate that they maybe thought in their initial business plan. They're getting their rents. Well, often they're exceeding their projected rents. They're still good, strong occupancy, but it's like, well, Bill, let's go ahead and take the market, see where we can be. Another pain point right now, I don't think this will be a surprise to anybody's insurance. The only thing on that is it's a pain point for both the sellers and buyers. So it's a pain point that the buyers are going to have to encounter as well. So
Yeah, and that one I feel like is pretty difficult forever, right? Because insurance knows that it always has the upper hand because every single lender is going to require insurance regardless
Right.
if it's selling or buying, That's wild.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, Mike, there was a large carrier that wrote a lot of Tulsa properties and was actually keeping prices down. Well, then with the war and, the war in Ukraine is actually having an effect on some insurance companies. And also, a lot of these natural disasters have been occurring quite a bit at an increased rate. And that's also causing a lot of pressure on insurance companies because they can't make the money that they used to be able to make, right? And then with the collapse of that one insurance carrier in Tulsa, they were no longer able to keep prices low. And so everybody else was like, hey, now we can raise prices and keep going up even higher. Right. So we're
right.
seeing things ridiculous, $650 to $850, even $1,000 per door,
Yeah.
which is absolutely absurd. So
We keep I think we're one of the only brokers to do so. We do an annual expense survey, and the insurance was experienced the highest growth of any of the expense categories that we monitor. And I want to say over a 2-year time, because we actually publish it every other year, over a 2-year time, I want to say the increase in insurance we saw was about 38%.
jeez.
And keep in mind, that's kind of trailing data because we're still looking at financials from 2022 where they may not have had a renewal yet on their insurance. So yeah, I think that's definitely a painful spot for any owner right now.
I totally agree.
Right. I do have a question because we had mentioned bridge loans, rate caps, cap rates.
Cap-
Rate
Great
caps.
cast.
And all of the above. So I have not been in commercial real estate for 13 years. This is like a question for also people who are newer in the space. Has the cycle happened more than once of like the problem with the increase in interest rates and then people having their variable rate without a rate cap or bridge loans? Like, I'm just wondering how often it happens. I mean, I'm sure I could like look up the data, but I haven't yet. And like, can people look out for this going forward?
I'll try to speak to this. I don't know that I'm by any means going to be an expert at it. We have seen, rising and falling interest rates. I do want to say this, at least in my 13 years of business, well, I know actually going back to the 80s, we haven't seen as steep of a rate increase
Okay.
as we've seen now, or as significant. I'm a little bit of a student of economics. Let me say that I'm a student of economics without actually having a degree in economics. So it's one of those subjects that fascinates me. I love reading the books about it, particularly the ones like, let me look at my shelf, the super economics or super freakonomics. Freakonomics, I don't know if you've
Yeah.
ever read it, but I love books that boil down economics to basic stories, It's like,
Yeah.
but so one of the things I kind of follow is, or I look back and don't do this because it might scare the whatever out of you. But if you look at the charts looking at the prime interest rate, if you look at that going back to say the late 70s, early 80s, that part in our economic history is pretty frightening. I mean, at one point that I think the prime interest rate was 21.5%. It's frightening to me because I see some similarities to the economy then and now. And now, granted, I was in middle school, so let me qualify that. I was not in the business. There's some similarities, but there's also a contrast too. Do I think we're going to see interest rates continuing to climb to those record levels? No, I don't think so. But I do think in my time in the business, this has been the most significant shift in interest rates that we've seen, and probably having a lot of unique people that haven't had to deal with this before are now to figure out how to make things work in the increased interest rate environment.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for
No,
explaining.
I kind of have a reason for being kind of a nerd when it comes to interest rates. Is my parents, I mentioned we were transferred from Cincinnati. My dad was transferred from Cincinnati, Ohio to Tulsa in like 1979, 1980, that time frame. So my dad's down here. We're back home still trying to get our house sold. At the time, interest rates are just skyrocketing. There's no market for homes.
Yeah.
It was a weird time. So,
Yeah.
as soon as those rates dipped, the demand was back. They sold the house. We got to move to Oklahoma and everything was right again. But I experienced some of the pain that my family had to go through trying to sell a house when mortgage rates were, double digits.
Yeah. Which is crazy. I mean, if you run like a amortization table on, an interest rate at 21%, you'll be very surprised, if you can afford a $400,000 house now at, 5%, let's say. If you run that same amortization table at 21%, you'll be very surprised if you can barely even afford like a $50,000 house, right? So very dramatic, right?
Mhm.
Just perspective for everybody. Mike, I want to bring up one thing to talk about a little bit about the Tulsa economy since we're kind of talking about economics here. You also mentioned earlier, the main driver in the Tulsa market is a lot of C-class properties. From what my understanding, my research, and my understanding of the Tulsa economic cycle, basically, there was a period of time, where there was a lot of building that occurred in the 60s and 70s, and maybe some very little into the 80s, right? But then there was a pause, I feel like, and you see this when you're looking at properties in Tulsa specifically, where there's a pause in vintage of properties between like 1980 until like 95, or later. And that's because, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you could speak to this more, but from what I understand, like that was all because of the economy in Tulsa was kind of driven by like oil and gas. And then they realized really quick, Tulsa, the city of Tulsa, realized quickly that, hey, let's not be dependent on one specific industry. Let's diversify now. And so they were able to catch that and fix that before they became Detroit, right? So,
Right.
yeah, I don't know if you want to speak to that. I'm sure you experienced that. You saw that more than I understand it. So,
No, absolutely, and you are entirely correct on that. It's interesting, I'll be talking to a buyer that's maybe new to the market, not familiar with it, and one of the things, well, we would love to buy B properties. I was like, well, we would love to have some.
Right.
by by and large, we really don't have much B class, particularly if you kind of follow the more traditional definition of a B class property. You're right. The majority of our housing stock here was built in the 60s, 70s, and pretty much up into about 83, 84. There's a few others that lagged on a little later, but not much. And then it really stopped. Tulsa has almost what I've heard it referred to as the lost decade. We were the oil capital of the world, which was a fantastic thing to be until it wasn't.
Yeah.
And when the oil market cratered in the 80s, it was not a good thing to be the oil capital of the world. But before that, that is one of the things that's also made Tulsa such a beautiful city. I mean, we were the oil capital, center of oil production. The oil companies were headquartered here. So in the 30s, that was an amazing thing because we still had money because of that. Our downtown is filled with beautiful Art Deco buildings that were constructed at a time when a lot of cities weren't able to build anything.
Mm.
So, the good thing is we have this beautiful past, if you will. Thank you to the oil industry. But you're right. In the 80s, we had to diversify or we were going to die. I read an interesting statistic that roughly Austin, Texas, in the late 70s was smaller than Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's not now, but because we basically lost a decade to growth when the oil companies left Tulsa, relocated, consolidated, went to Houston, and Tulsa realized it quickly it needed to diversify, and we have. We're a very, very diverse economy now. Actually, manufacturing is very strong in our community. It kind of flies a little bit under the radar because you think manufacturing is, belching smokestacks, and the reality is our manufacturing here is strong and you know, maybe environmental friendly. You don't necessarily see it. I mean, sure, Tulsa still has, refineries and heavy industry, but we a lot of the manufacturing base has grown here. Well, I guess what it means is our market's a little bit unique. We have a lot of C property, and that's basically created opportunity, probably for guys like you that recognize you can take a B or a C class property and basically reposition it, improve it, and fill in the void, if you will, of our market that just doesn't have any B class property. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. And I love the Art Deco downtown. It's one of my favorite things. Every time I come to Tulsa, I like to stay downtown and like walk the streets. You have downtown. It's really I love Art Deco style. So it's really cool. And I love like the revival of like the Route 66, neon lights and stuff like that. And that's kind of coming back in Tulsa and
yeah.
downtown area and stuff like that. So it's really cool.
Tulsa's got some fantastic little neighborhoods like Route 66, and the initiative along there is great too. It's a neat city. We're doing kind of similar. Oklahoma City has little pockets that have developed over the years, and now are those little neighborhoods just draw people in, like the Paseo district, the Plaza district, things like that. We're seeing a lot of that in Tulsa with Cherry Street, downtown, the Cathedral district. That one I haven't really figured out yet. There's a lot of cathedrals, but there's not much else yet in that district.
And it's cool just with the
You're really
Kaiser
good.
Running stuff too, like within the community.
Oh yeah, definitely. You can't have a conversation about Tulsa without discussing the impact of the Kaiser Family Foundation, the Gathering Place. And I have to admit, I was a little bit of a skeptic. So we're tearing down this beautiful old house that was on this acreage in Midtown Tulsa along the river, and we're going to build a park. Okay. And as it kept going on, because it was a big project, it took several years. It closed a major road, and it's just kind of, okay, I see. And then when it opened, we went to go down there. We went 3 times and could not come anywhere near parking, anywhere near the park because it was such a crowd there every time. So finally we get down there like several weeks after it's open. And it's just fantastic. Now it's one of my wife and I's favorite spots. And we'll literally go down there and, have a cup of coffee. Although I don't drink coffee, this is tea. And just relax and just walk the park. So it's a fantastic addition to Tulsa. So
Love that.
That is
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. They're adding whitewater rafting soon too, which is really cool.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, like
So it's fun. It's neat as a long-time Tulsan to finally see the river and that area become an asset to the community rather than a detriment, and that's what we're seeing. So
that's really cool. Yeah, it's only up from here with Tulsa.
And we're here for it.
Yeah. Right. There's been so much growth in Tulsa over the last 3 years, and I'm glad we identified it early and got in, built the relationships that we have with you and other vendors and stuff like that we have in Tulsa. And we, like Susie and I said this over and over, like we are all in on Tulsa. Like that's all we're focusing on. Well, we have a great property management company too that
Right.
helps. But yeah, we're all in on Tulsa. So
it's great to hear.
yeah,
I
I'm
like
trying to
Tulsa.
convince Susie to move there once I retires too. So
That's a
Down,
conversation that is still
downtown Tulsa.
a
I love to live. I
conversation.
love to live downtown. So at least I'll have a flat downtown, and we can go visit whenever.
There you go.
We actually went through this phase maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Missy and myself was like, why don't we live downtown? We had some friends that sold their house and lived downtown, loved it. Oh, you got to do this. This is so much fun. And we spent probably 3 weekends that summer looking at different apartments downtown. And I have to admit, part of that might have been prompted by a really hot summer and a lot of lawn that needed mowing. So ultimately, we decided no, we still like to have a house because we're just accumulating a lot of junk. And, I'm not quite ready to streamline that well. But no, I love the thought of just living downtown, walking down to the restaurants. I love walkable neighborhoods. I live in about a walkable neighborhood, but I love walkable neighborhoods. When we go on a trip, that's one of the things we do is just search a walkable place because once we get there, I'm not getting in a car. Yeah, I'm going to hop on the streetcar. I'm going to take public transportation. I'm going to do whatever it takes to not get in a car on vacation. So
Yeah, it makes a big difference. You just see so much more too and experience so much.
you do.
And I
You
like
do.
that.
There's so much to see that you just don't even notice if you're flying by at 60 miles an hour.
Totally.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Unfortunately, we are moving towards the end of the show, which brings us to our adventurous 4 questions. I know time is flowing, right? So if you are ready, we'll begin the questioning.
Sure. I studied up on them.
All right, here we go. So the first question we have for you, Mike, is where is one place you wish to travel to and why?
I I would say Europe. Part of the reason why I'm half Italian. My dad was Italian. His parents immigrated from Italy. I think I'd like to see a little bit of where they came from. And just I'm a bit of a history buff too, so I'd like to kind of see Europe. And I think it'd be fun to be able to travel like literally through 3 or 4 countries in a day. That's not. I mean, think about how long it takes to drive across Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So, and also, I will say, most of my vacation time, I generally try to go south. I love the beaches. That's just our thing to go to the ocean. So it would be definitely a different vacation for us to do something like that. But I think that's what I like to see. So that way, so I could see the apartments there too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I was just gonna say I love Europe.
Yeah, too. I mean, there was a thing in Italy, actually, there was like a city that you could buy like houses for like, tens of euros or something like that. Just because there was like a declining population. They're just trying to get people in there to buy these houses. Like beautiful city on the mountainside overlooking vineyards and things like that. I was like, I'd live there for £10 or €10. And like,
Right,
yeah,
blew
yeah,
our mind.
yeah. So
Oh, don't tempt me. I mean, I'll be coming back.
No, it's cool.
cool.
So then our question is, or second question, what is something on your bucket list and how are you leveraging real estate to achieve it?
This kind of actually ties into question one. My bucket list probably consists of traveling. We love to travel. We love to go to cities we haven't been to before, spend a few days. Obviously building my practice, my business, my advanced age. Those are all things that are kind of working towards hopefully getting to the point where I anticipate being in this profession for quite a while. I love it. I love what I do. But perhaps, turning the reins over to somebody like Chris, my significantly younger partner here in the office, to where maybe I slowed down a little bit in terms of the hours spent and spend a little bit more time traveling.
Yeah,
So
I love that.
the other way too, I'm trying to leverage that is obviously investing more passively, but you guys know that. So
That's cool. Thanks for sharing that. The third question we have for you, I'm going to switch this up a little bit, from a typical question. But what I'm going to ask you is like, what is one piece of advice for a investor who is either new to an area or potentially a new investor who wants to start engaging a broker? Like, what advice would you give to that person?
there's a book on it that's great. Now, I don't remember, but another broker wrote it. I think it's The Elite Investor, but it's got a ton of great advice. But a lot of it's really, really common sense. Number one, I'd say get into the market, meet the brokers that know the market well, find the specialists. Don't I see that a lot with buyers trying to enter our market, and they've engaged a broker that's maybe a generalist, or maybe it's the person that sold them a house a few years ago, or maybe it's the person that sold them an office building and they sold that sale or something. Find a specialist. I'm not to say anything bad about those guys because they certainly know more than I do about other topics, but find who is active in your market in the segment that you want to own. Who, if you're trying to buy workforce housing, who handles a lot of those transactions, who's the expert in it. Meet with those guys. And then I think the other thing you can do that is important to build that relationship is, have a regular call, whether it be monthly, as a catch up. Stay in front of them. And likewise, we try to do the same as brokers,
Yeah.
And then, good feedback. If a broker brings you a deal, good, timely feedback. Hey, we love this deal. We don't like this aspect. Or, no, I really don't like, engage us. Tell us why, because that helps us hone in on, helping a new buyer as to what they really want, is what they like. I'm big on building relationships. I could sell somebody something and that be the only time we ever do business again, but I don't really like I don't think it's a good long-term plan, but the other reality is I'm here to help people succeed. I want them to buy something that they like. I want them to look at us as a broker as being a resource. You can come to me and have some knowledge about another sale, or I may have some knowledge about what's happening with the rents or whatever. It's kind of more of a long-term thing. So I think entering a market is trying a little bit like maybe speed dating and find a broker that you click with. And just giving good feedback, good communication. And I guess it's kind of like a marriage. Communication is probably first and foremost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
totally agree.
the point of communicating when a deal comes out, I think is always huge, but not something that a lot of people think about. Just because if you're only communicating right when you like a deal, it's like, if somebody only reached out to you every time they wanted something, how would that make you feel? It's like, it kind of blows my mind, actually.
Yeah.
I think too, when I send out a deal, just like getting the feedback, not an email blast. I don't expect, all, 90,000 people saw my email to respond, but, I'm like, hey, this is a deal that might work for you. And here's why I think it would be, or, hey, I got this one coming up. Respond back saying, yeah, I like it. Let's dig it a little further, or no. And I'm not saying I feel like I'm giving you guys advice when that's not the case, because you guys do that. You're wonderful about that. But it helps you as a broker better fine tune what you need to do to help that buyer, if that makes sense.
No, it
Yeah.
totally makes
Absolutely.
sense. And
Cool.
yeah, it's a win-win situation, really.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that was really great advice. I appreciate that, Mike. I think a lot of our listeners who are interested, in building broker relationships and things like that, I think that was really good advice. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And then our fourth and final question is, if you had unlimited resources available to you, how would you leave an impact?
Well, who says I don't? No, just kidding.
Good.
I wish. I think the thing that I would try to do, one of the things I see so much, and you see this in the apartment world a lot. I love my business. I love what I do. I love apartments. I love going in apartments. I love, hey, what did they do here? What's new design? But one of the things I think I see is there's no our education system has failed in terms of giving people practical education about financial matters. Even smart people don't know what to do with money. So if I could leave an impact, I would try to leave an impact in some sort of way to give people better tools when they're out of high school. What do you do? Don't go buy the expensive car. Don't get a car payment. What you can do to establish a more secure life for you. Because I know too many people live paycheck to paycheck, and it's sad. It's one of the conversations I've had. I have 3 daughters and a stepdaughter. One of them came to me, my youngest, and said, "Dad, talk to me about a Roth IRA." And I'm like, "Yes, let's talk about that. This is great." Because at 18 years old, not many 18-year-olds are thinking of, "Ooh, if I put money away now, what is the effect down the road?" And I showed her, gave her some illustrations about how little you had to save at this time and how time is on your side. And I look back and I wish somebody had had that conversation with me. I mean, my parents were smart, but I mean, they just didn't necessarily know. So I would love to be able to teach people, and not just a certain economic segment, just even across you walk into an affordable living, apartment, and you realize there's people there that just have never been taught, how to budget, some just basic financial common sense. So if there was a way to help leave a legacy for that, or make part of something I'd like to, because I know people could live in a more secure place in their life if they had a little bit of guidelines and some tools earlier on in life to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Even something to add that I think is huge is that you can have this impact almost at any age, because once you plant the seed, like the idea will grow eventually. We don't ever get to decide that, but like if the seed's never planted, then, there is no opportunity for that. So like just even for anyone out there, like having the conversations at any age are important.
No, agree on that. I mean, I've made a difference in just the past few years personally, financially looking at investing in, passively in real estate. I mean, some things before that you just didn't really think of. You're too busy with your job. You're too busy, just making sure you get in. That don't take a step back and realize, hey, there's more things I can do to secure a good future for myself.
Totally.
So that way I can go back to question 2 and travel a lot.
Yeah. I like it. I like it.
I got to be honest. Some of your posts, I've been jealous of some of these destinations. I definitely need to make an effort to travel more.
Yeah, the world is wonderful. I'm here for it. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
I haven't said that. I mentioned I want to go to Europe, but there's still so much in the United States I haven't seen. And it's
Yeah.
a fantastic country, fantastic. I mean, I got to Boston for the first time in my life, a year ago for my daughter's graduation. And it's like, how did I not do this before? I mean, it's like walking around in, history book.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Love it.
To go there.
Yeah. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Mike, for having you on the show. I know you provided quite a bit of value to our Adventurous family, so thank you so much. Before we end the show, would you mind sharing with our Adventurous family how they can reach out and get a hold of you?
I'm happy to, and I did not come prepared for this part. I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. Michael Marara, I think, is my Facebook. I get this. I'm even on Instagram. I have no idea how to log into that. I had a social media person that really helped me set up that stuff. I'm Multifamily Mike on Instagram.
Oh,
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
Yay.
You'll see my content's probably not the most up to date there, so I need to get better at that. If you'd like, I can get my information to you too if you want to put that into
I'll
it.
put a show notes. Yeah.
Space, my email and our company website as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, because
will-
I'll add all that so that people can just do like the one click and all good.
I will say social media is something I was great at because I found somebody that was spectacular at it. She's moved on, got a doctorate, and is doing something else. So I definitely need to get back into being more social on my social media.
I like it. Yeah, well, thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure, and we will see you next time we're in Tulsa.
Sounds great. And thank you so much for having me. I was all nervous for no reason.
Don't be.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Until next time, explore more, adventure awaits.